Okay, so we've got this really interesting stack of material you sent in. It digs into the differences, the real differences between, well, what people call the rich and poor money mindsets.
Yeah.
How they actually think, how they behave with money. So our mission here in this deep dive is to kind of sift through all that, pull out the key stuff, the important insights, and crucially, land on some solid, actionable steps for you, things you can actually do for financial growth. The big thing right away seems to be this. Making money isn't just about your salary, right?
Absolutely not. It runs much deeper. It's rooted in your core beliefs about money
Yeah.
and the little habits you have every single day.
Yeah, habits.
And it's fascinating, really, how these beliefs can almost like steer the ship. They can either push you forward or sometimes hold you back without you even noticing it.
Okay, let's get into the first big contrast then. This idea popped up a lot in the sources. Abundance versus scarcity thinking. The rich mindset seems to operate from this place of potential, like the world's full of opportunities, there's enough to go around, you can create wealth.
Yeah, it's an expansive view. Wealth isn't seen as a limited pie that everyone's fighting over. It's something that can be generated through, creativity, hard work, making smart
It
moves.
sounds quite optimistic, actually.
It is. And that optimism often translates into being more willing to try new things, seeing
Mhm.
challenges not as roadblocks, but as chances to grow.
Okay, so then the flip side is the poor mindset.
Hmm.
And this view sees money more like, well, a fixed resource. If I get some, that means less for you.
Exactly. That zero-sum game idea can lead to feeling like you're always competing, maybe even feeling, jealous or resentful when others succeed.
And that fear, that feeling of not enough, could make someone hesitate to even go for opportunities.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because the underlying assumption is that resources are limited and maybe you won't get your share.
So the big question is, how do you even start to shift away from that scarcity feeling if that's where you are?
Well, the sources actually suggest something quite simple but powerful to begin with.
Okay, what's that?
It's an action step focused on gratitude.
Gratitude.
Yeah,
Interesting.
the idea is every morning, just take a moment, write down 3 things you're genuinely grateful for. Could be anything, big or small.
And the thinking behind that is?
It actively trains your brain to notice what you do have, the good stuff, already in your life, instead of constantly focusing on what's missing.
Shifting the focus.
Exactly. And that small mental shift, done consistently, can start to change how you perceive everything else, including financial opportunities. It opens you up a bit.
It's not about ignoring problems then, just changing your default setting.
Precisely. You're building a foundation of appreciation, which makes it harder for that fear of lack to take over completely.
Okay, that makes sense. What was the next big difference the sources highlighted?
It's about time horizons, basically long-term growth versus short-term gratification.
Right, I saw that too. The rich mindset seems focused on the future,
Hmm.
like prioritizing investment stocks, real estate, maybe starting a business, even education things that build wealth over time.
Even if it means, making some sacrifices right now, it's about delayed gratification.
That ability to see the future reward being bigger than the immediate pleasure.
Exactly. Whereas the poor mindset often gets pulled towards what feels good right now.
The instant gratification stuff.
Yeah, those impulse buys, maybe using credit cards for things that aren't really essential.
And the danger there, as the sources pointed out, is getting caught in that high interest debt cycle.
Which actively works against building long-term wealth. It digs the hole deeper.
It's like a quick fix that creates a bigger problem down the line.
And often these spending decisions aren't purely logical, are they? There's an emotional component,
Definitely. Which makes the next action step quite relevant.
was suggested.
The 24-hour rule. For any purchase that isn't strictly essential, just wait a day.
Ah, create some space.
Yes, step back from that initial impulse. It gives you a chance to think, do I really need this or do I just want it right now?
A little cooling off period. Lets the rational brain catch up with the emotional urge. Helps separate needs from wants.
Simple, but potentially very effective.
Right.
Okay, another interesting contrast was about where the money goes. Investing in yourself versus spending on status symbols.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
The rich mindset seems to view learning, taking courses, reading books, finding mentors as a really high yield investment.
Because it builds your skills, your knowledge. Those things compound over time, making you more capable, more valuable.
It's like investing in your own earning potential.
Exactly. Your personal development is seen as your greatest asset. It's fundamental.
Then you have the other side, the poor mindset, which, according to the sources, can sometimes focus more on looking successful.
Right. Spending on things luxury items, maybe to project an image.
But the problem is that spending might actually take away from resources that could have been used for, like, actual skill development.
It prioritizes the appearance over the substance, the facade over the foundation, as you said before.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Often the people who are genuinely secure don't feel that need to constantly signal it with expensive things.
Their focus is internal, on growth, not so much on external validation.
So how do you start making that shift? What's the action step?
The recommendation is pretty concrete.
Hmm.
Try to allocate at least, say, 5% of your monthly income specifically towards personal development.
5%. Okay.
And that could be anything an online course, books related to your field or finances, attending a workshop, maybe even coaching. Just making that deliberate, consistent investment in you.
I like that. Deliberate investment. Now let's talk about something that makes a lot of people nervous.
Risk.
Ah, yes, risk.
Huge difference here in the sources between the two mindsets. The rich mindset seems to see calculated risk as, well, necessary for growth.
Keyword there, being calculated.
Right. It's not just gambling. It involves doing your homework, planning, and then actually taking the step, whether that's launching a side project, investing in the stock market after research, whatever it might be.
They understand there's a potential downside, but they weigh it against the potential upside.
And they're willing to step out of the comfort zone thoughtfully.
Okay, then the poor mindset tends to see pretty much all risk as bad, something to avoid.
Yeah, there's a strong pull towards perceived safety, like just sticking with the regular paycheck.
Even if inflation is eating away at its value over time.
Even then, the main goal becomes avoiding any kind of loss, even if it means missing out on significant potential gains. Fear of loss dominates.
That sounds really limiting. It could stop you from trying anything new.
It can be very restrictive, yeah. Prevents people from exploring entrepreneurship or investments that could really change their financial picture long term.
So how can someone dip their toes in, get more comfortable with this idea of calculated risk?
The action step here is all about starting small. Really small.
Like,
Maybe open one of those micro-investing accounts. Put in a tiny amount you wouldn't miss terribly. Or start a very low-stake side hustle, something that doesn't require a huge upfront investment.
so the goal isn't immediate profit.
Not necessarily. The initial goal is just to learn. Learn how risk and reward work in practice, manage it in a controlled way, build confidence and understanding from doing it.
Okay, learning by doing, but safely. Got it. Another big theme was income sources.
Multiple streams versus just one.
Yeah, the rich mindset often involves actively building different ways money comes in, right?
Definitely. Things like dividends from stocks, maybe rental income if they own property, royalties, perhaps some consulting on the side, diversification.
It creates more stability, like a safety net.
Exactly. If one source slows down or disappears, the others can cushion the blow. Much more resilient.
Whereas the poor mindset often relies heavily, maybe even entirely, on that single job.
Which leaves the whole household budget really exposed, doesn't it?
Totally. Vulnerable to layoffs, reduced hours, wage stagnation. Makes sense.
It's a major point of financial stress and anxiety for many people.
So what's the practical step someone can take to start thinking about more income streams?
The advice is pretty straightforward. Start by brainstorming. Think about one possible side gig or maybe a passive income idea.
Something that fits your interests or skills.
Ideally, yes, something you might actually enjoy or be good at. Then, and this is key actually, schedule time for it. Even just 1 hour a week.
Just an hour.
To start, yes, dedicate that hour to actually developing the idea. Researching, planning, taking a small action. It's about getting the ball rolling consistently.
Okay, consistency over intensity. I like that. Now, this next one is subtle but important. Frugality, the difference between being smart with money versus just depriving yourself.
Right, frugality with leverage versus frugality to the point of hardship.
Explain that difference, the rich mindset version.
Okay, so from the sources, this mindset often involves being very conscious of spending, yes, living modestly perhaps, but also understanding how to use debt strategically.
Strategically. How so?
Like using a low-interest loan, maybe a mortgage, to buy an asset that will generate income, like a rental property. They see certain kinds of debt as a tool for growth, while keeping everyday spending in check and reinvesting savings.
So it's intentional, using money and maybe even some debt to make more money.
Exactly. The frugality isn't just about cutting back everywhere. It's about directing resources towards things that build future wealth.
Okay, and the contrast. The poor mindset approach to frugality.
Sometimes that can mean cutting costs on things that are actually important, like maybe skimping on preventative health or car maintenance, which costs more later.
Penny wise, pound foolish kind of thing.
A bit like that. And there's also often a tendency to treat credit cards almost like extra cash, leading to that high interest debt we talked about.
Right. The kind of debt that just drains your
Yeah, it
finances.
becomes this huge weight, making it really hard to get ahead. The focus shifts to just managing debt rather than building wealth.
So, how do you move towards that more strategic approach? Action step.
First step, get a clear picture of your debts. Audit everything. Then, focus like a laser on paying down the high-interest stuff first, credit cards, usually.
Get rid of the bad debt.
Right. And then maybe consider if using low-interest debt strategically for an income-producing investment makes sense for your specific situation. It's about seeing debt as potentially productive, not just consumptive.
Okay, interesting distinction. Let's talk about failure. How do these mindsets handle setbacks?
Oh, this is crucial. Huge difference here. The rich mindset tends to view failure or setbacks as well as feedback.
Feedback, not the end of the world.
Not at all. It's data. An opportunity to learn what didn't work, figure out why, adjust the plan, and try again. Resilience is baked in.
They see it as part of the process of learning and growing.
Exactly. It builds grit. They understand that very few successful things work perfectly on the first try.
Whereas the poor mindset might take failure much more personally.
Often, yes. It can be seen as proof of inadequacy, like, see, I knew I couldn't do it.
And that leads to
Avoiding risk altogether. Avoiding new things, new challenges, just to avoid the potential pain or embarrassment of failing again.
wow, that fear can really hold you back.
Incredibly limiting. It prevents people from stepping outside their comfort zone, which is often where growth happens.
So how do you start changing your relationship with failure? Make it less scary?
The action steps suggested is pretty cool. Keep a failure journal.
Failure journal. Sounds depressing.
Maybe. But the idea is constructive. When something doesn't work out, write down what happened. Honestly, analyze why it happened, what you learned from it, and importantly, how you'll use that lesson next time.
Ah, so it's about extracting the learning, turning it from an emotional hit into useful information.
Exactly. Reframing it as a data point for future attempts.
Yeah.
Makes it less personal, more practical.
Okay, final big contrast area. Relationships and generosity. Networking versus isolation.
Right. The rich mindset typically recognizes the huge power of connections. Building relationships, sharing knowledge freely, mentoring others, being mentored. They understand that a strong network opens doors to new ideas, partnerships, opportunities. Collaboration is key.
There's a sense that helping others succeed doesn't take away from your own success.
Often it's the opposite. There's an understanding that generosity and contribution often come back around in unexpected ways. It's about building social capital.
Okay, and the poor mindset on this.
Sometimes it can lean towards guarding resources, guarding information very closely.
Why? Out of fear.
Often, yeah. A fear that if you share what you know or help someone else, it might somehow reduce your own chances. That scarcity thinking again applied to relationships.
Which leads to being more isolated.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
And missing out on the benefits of collaboration, shared learning, and those network effects.
So how do you cultivate that more generous, connected approach? Action step.
The suggestion is a monthly commitment. Do at least one act of financial generosity or mentorship.
Doesn't have to be huge.
Not at all. It could be sharing a really helpful article or resource with someone in your field, making a small donation to a cause, maybe introducing two people you know who could benefit from connecting.
Just consciously acting in a way that contributes to others.
Exactly. Actively practicing generosity and connection building.
Okay, that's a lot of contrasts and ideas. To make it more concrete, the sources laid out a kind of starter plan, right? A 4-week framework.
Yeah, a way to start putting these ideas into practice systematically.
Let's run through it quickly. Week 1.
Week 1 is awareness. Track your expenses meticulously, every penny. The goal is to see where your money's actually going and spot any scarcity patterns.
Yeah.
And start that daily gratitude practice we talked about earlier. Focus on what you have.
Okay. Awareness and gratitude. Week 2.
Week 2 is education. Pick up a personal finance book, listen to a relevant podcast, basically consume some knowledge about wealth building.
Learn something new.
And importantly, take a small practical step.
Yeah.
Set up a basic investment account. Even if you only put in a tiny amount, like the equivalent of a few coffees, just get it open.
Demystify the process. Okay.
Yeah.
Week 3.
Week 3 is application. Start drafting a plan, even just rough notes for potential multiple income streams. Brainstorm those side hustles
Get ideas on paper.
and actually implement the 24-hour rule for non-essential purchases. Put it into practice.
Apply the learning. Makes sense. And week 4.
Week 4 is reflection and adjustment. Look back at the last 3 weeks. What worked? What was hard? Where did you stumble?
Be honest with yourself.
Yeah. And then adjust your plan. Maybe you need to tweak your savings goal, refine that side hustle idea, find different learning resources. It's about making it sustainable for you.
Continuous improvement.
Exactly. It's not a one-time fix.
So wrapping this all up, looking across all the material you shared on these mindset differences, the main takeaway feels pretty clear.
What stands out most to you?
That shifting your financial reality isn't just about wishing for more money or even getting a raise, though that helps. It's deeper. It's about really examining and changing those underlying beliefs, the habits, the tiny choices you make with your money every single day.
Absolutely. It's about consciously building that abundance mindset, thinking long-term, investing in yourself, learning how to handle risk smartly. That's what paves the way.
It's a journey, not just a destination.
Definitely more of a marathon than a sprint.
Yeah.
Small, consistent changes add up over time.
Right. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Out of everything we've talked about today, abundance, long-term focus, self-investment, risk, failure, generosity, which one of those mindset shifts really hits home for you right now?
Yeah, which one resonates most with where you are?
And thinking about that, what's one small thing, just one tiny manageable action you could take, maybe even today, to start moving in that direction? What's that first step towards building a more prosperous future for yourself?